The Dallas Mavericks ready to explore the trade market for Klay Thompson, plus the Clippers in on Ja Morant. What would that look like? And let's dive in. I'm Trevor Lane. This is the Basketball Bulletin. Make sure you subscribe right here. We say it all the time, but 70% of you are not subscribed when you're watching these videos. Let's fix that. Hit that subscribe button. Great way to help us grow. All right, let's get into it. Brett Siegel of Clutch Points had a great article out today with some intel around the NBA trade front. Let's dive into this first bit here. NBA Central aggregated some key pieces here. Klay Thompson, his trade value to the Dallas Mavericks. It's no secret that Harrison, talking about Nico, thank you, Nico, by the way, that Harrison and the Mavericks front offices will explore what return exists for Klay Thompson before the trade deadline, and several teams are monitoring Daniel Gafford's status. The 27-year-old center recently signed a 3-year, $60 million contract extension this offseason, but he remains trade eligible this season. Okay, so here's what happens. Here's what happens in the NBA when you don't win. Change comes. Change happens when you don't win. We saw it with Memphis, right? Memphis not winning, and they traded Des Bane. Didn't feel like they're where they needed to be. They made the very painful, difficult decision to move on from one of their pillars of the franchise. And you look at what's going on with Dallas. Right? By the way, tonight, the Grizzlies play the Mavs, two teams that both badly need a win. Memphis and Dallas, both right now, swirling in controversy. Fans are not happy with what's going on there and the whole Ja Morant situation, which we'll get into in just a minute. But Dallas, 2-6, and their offense, man, it is borderline unwatchable. It's the worst offense in the NBA. Statistically, their offensive rating is horrible, and it's a tough watch. So the Mavs, given what's going on, they have to consider making changes, and that could include trading a player like Klay Thompson. Now, Klay is now coming off the bench in Dallas. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, but Klay Thompson is now coming off the bench in Dallas, and he seems to believe that he's turned a corner, that he just didn't have his legs under him early on in the season, and he did shoot particularly well in their last game, albeit off the bench. And that was not something that he particularly enjoyed during his stint with the Warriors, was coming off the bench. They shifted towards that later on in his stint there. He prefers to be a starter, but $16.6 million under contract this season, $17.4 million next season, can be extended. But I'll tell you this, Klay Thompson has to get the Klay Thompson of old back, or instead of the old Klay Thompson. And at least in terms of his shooting percentages, he's never going to be the defensive player after the injuries that he's suffered. He's never going to be that again. That's just reality. It's the unfortunate truth, but he can't be a 29% three-point shooter. Now, again, he did shoot well last game coming off the bench. I do think better days are ahead. Do I buy that Klay Thompson is suddenly can't shoot the basketball? No, the guy's one of the greatest shooters in NBA history. I don't buy that at 35 years old, he's lost the ability to shoot the ball. I think this is small sample size and the numbers will bounce back. However, if Klay Thompson is indeed, because he's no longer the defender that he once was, a bench player, our team's going to be willing to commit $16.6 million to a bench player, and then $17.4 million next season. Teams right now are allergic to long-term salary, even if it's just an extra year. So I don't think this is a immovable contract, but I don't think teams are going to be lining up to get Klay Thompson. Sometimes you have to separate the name from the game. If this were Klay 5 years ago, yes, teams are beating down the door trying to get Klay. I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case for Dallas. Can they still find moves? For sure. I just don't think they're going to get a big piece for Klay Thompson like his name would necessarily suggest. Now, Daniel Gafford is another one that's interesting. They signed him to a new deal this summer, so he is locked up long-term. That does provide some certainty, but I also wonder when we look at Daniel Gafford, is this a contract that teams are going to want to have? The only long-term contracts that teams want are obviously team-friendly deals. They have to be very certain that that's a deal where in a pinch, they could flip that contract for another player and that they would get positive value. Teams are just so hesitant to take on any kind of negative money. It's part of the reason why restricted free agency is basically destroyed now, because teams, in order to get a restricted free agent away from a team, to get their incumbent team to not match, you have to overpay them. Nobody wants to overpay in this collective bargaining agreement. So when we look at what Daniel Gafford is, This season he's only 3 games in, but 12 points, 5.3 rebounds, 1.3 steals, 1.7 blocks in 22.3 minutes. Is he a true starting center? I guess that's the question. If he is, if a team looks at him and says Daniel Gafford is a starter, they'll be happy to pay him. This is fine. Starter money, no problem. If they say we really want him to be our backup, that's where it gets a bit more challenging. So Brett Siegel mentioned the Los Angeles Lakers as a team that's had interest in Daniel Gafford in the past, but they've got DeAndre Ayton. Is Gafford going to start over Ayton? Probably not. So if you're the Lakers and you're worried about future flexibility, just as every other team in the NBA is, do you want to lock in to long-term salary for a backup spot? Or are you better off committing those resources somewhere else? Could Gafford help the Lakers? Could he help any number of teams? Absolutely. But it's more a question of allocating resources. We see it in the NFL all the time. Do you want to put a bunch of money into a superstar running back? Or do you want to go beef up that offensive line instead and then go the cheaper route with the RBs? It's not so much a question of, is Daniel Gafford worth this? It's, if he's your backup, is that how you want to spend your money, this much on a backup player? So that's going to be the big question for the Mavs and Daniel Gafford. If they're looking to be a seller on the market, it's going to be what teams around the NBA see Daniel Gafford and say, starter. If they get there, then I think they'll find a market for Gafford. And keep in mind, the Mavs not necessarily in a position to move on from any bigs right now, given that Derek Lively's had injury issues this season, as has Anthony Davis. So this massive Mavs front line has not been what we thought it would be, in part because they haven't played well, but also in part because they have not been on the floor. All right. The Clippers as a potential landing spot for Ja Morant. Does this make any sense? I'm going to get to that in 1 minute. Don't go anywhere. Ever hear the Sleeper app? Here's a little secret. It's more than just a platform for season-long fantasy leagues. This year, millions of users enjoyed playing fantasy sports on Sleeper, but the app offers so much more. Live stats, real-time updates, and visualizations on all stats. A news feed, this is so important for me. You can get lightning-fast updates on your favorite players and teams. A real-time chat to allow you to engage with other users about individual plays and performances during the NFL and NBA seasons. So download the #1 sports app today. Experience it for yourself. When you use promo code Bulletin, you get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 25 states. Check out Sleeper today. And by the way, they do have a phenomenal promo going on right now as well. Free $20 entry. Go check that out. No deposit required. $20 entry for free. Go check them out. Use the link in the description down below, and that promo code is Bulletin. Okay, could the Clippers be a team to get into a Ja Morant sweepstakes if it does indeed develop? Another team, league personnel, again via Brett Siegel, have mentioned as a team to watch if Morant becomes available is the Clippers. Steve Ballmer is never afraid to pursue star-level talent, and with James Harden not getting any younger, bringing in a 26-year-old point guard with the dynamic, explosive style of play Morant possesses would be advantageous. There is some truth to that. However, for the Clippers, Morant has 3 years under contract. If you look at the way the Clippers have structured their salaries, their books are, man, aside from Ivica Zubac, who frankly is still a bargain contract in 2027, 2028 at $21 million, their books are very clean after that 2027 season. It's part of, look, the Clippers played last night. They looked very, very old. Didn't look good. And it was without Kawhi and without Harden, so that's certainly worth noting. But still, this team was put together to have a window right now and maybe next year, and to try to maximize the last couple of years with Harden and Kawhi, and then pivot away. And that's why they have all these salaries expiring on their books. And I think they could potentially pivot next summer, this coming summer, 2026. They could pivot then. I think they'll have the flexibility to potentially do that. So if you're going to go get Ja, though, you're eating into that flexibility for this summer, for next summer, for after that. Now, do you have salaries you can stack up to go get them? Yeah. I mean, you start throwing together guys like John Collins. Is Memphis going to have a lot of interest in Kawhi? Probably not, that, or at least they shouldn't if you're the Memphis Grizzlies. But you've got salaries. You whoop in another team, and maybe you can figure something out. And you've got guys like John Collins, Zubac. I would assume the Clippers would not be willing to trade him, but I would be asking for him if I'm the Grizzlies, despite the presence of Zach Edey there, who right now is out due to injury. Are there interesting young players on this roster, though, the Grizz should be interested in? No, frankly, there's not. With the exception of Cam Christie. Cam Christie is the one where if I am the Grizzlies, I'm not making any kind of deal with the Clips without getting Cam Christie. But then we got to talk about the draft capital that the Clippers have, or more accurately, don't really have. Their 2026 first is on the move. They've got a pick swap the year after that. They've got a 2028 first on the move. They have a swap after that. So they've got a number of their future picks are encumbered. So that could be a challenge as well in trying to put together an offer that would actually interest Memphis. So you have two things at play here where Ja Morant to the Clippers, on the surface, yeah, you're adding youth, you're adding athleticism, and with all those picks encumbered, can the Clippers really afford in 2027 to go into tank mode? Well, not really. I mean, their 2028 first-round pick is already gone, and their 2029 first-round pick is gone in a pick swap situation. So if they do decide to tank, well, right now, the Philadelphia 76ers will be thrilled because they've got those picks. So that's where going after a guy like Ja Morant right now and giving up some of that flexibility makes some sense for the Clippers, because they can't really pivot to a tank anyway. When they do have that flexibility in 2027, they have to win. They have to go put pieces together that can win right now, because it's not like they have their draft pick that year anyway to help them build. So that's something we have to keep in mind with the Clippers, where maybe not just pivoting towards a full rebuild post Kawhi and James Harden does make sense, because it's really tough to rebuild when you don't have your own draft pick. You don't have control of those picks. So that's a challenge for the Clippers. Ja Morant, exciting young talent. The Clippers, devoid of exciting young talent. I question how they would get him. But again, is Morant the kind of guy that you want to give up all that future flexibility for? Do you believe that Ja Morant's going to come to LA and have the kind of success that he's not been able to have in Memphis? Now, Brett Siegel did detail the problems that Morant has had in Memphis, talked about the locker room blow up between himself and Coach Isolo there, and essentially Isolo calling out the lack of leadership, the lack of hustle, and Morant saying, well, nobody's hustling, nobody's got energy because nobody likes your plans. Nobody likes your substitution pattern. We're not having fun with it, and that's why there's no energy. That's what the argument essentially came down to. It ultimately led to Ja Morant being suspended for a game by the Grizzlies, and to me, we know where this is likely headed. You never say never, but most likely Ja Morant will be on his way out in Memphis. So could the Clippers be a team to get in on it? Yeah, they could. It does make some sense just because their draft pick situation. I don't like Morant with James Harden and Kawhi Leonard, but if they want to make Morant a centerpiece for the future and a way to say, hey, even 2027, maybe even 2026, when we really pivot this franchise, we'll be able to go out there and win because we're going to have Ja Morant, Ivica Zubac, and then we're going to build around that. That does make some sense. And maybe that's what Ja needs in order to turn the page. If the Clippers had their draft picks, I wouldn't be saying this, and I don't necessarily think the Clippers have the pieces to get Ja Morant either, to be clear, but it does make some sense to me for them to be interested. All right, everybody, give me your thoughts in the comment section. What do you think about Ja Morant potentially going to the Clippers and Klay Thompson, the Mavs, already ready to explore the trade market with him, as well as Daniel Gafford? What can they expect in return? Give me your thoughts in the comment section down below. And again, don't forget to subscribe right here to the channel. Till next time, see ya and stay safe.